I was a salesman for a company that manufactured high-end intelligent butler robots, and up until yesterday, I was just trying to scrape by on my base salary. My life took a sharp, surreal turn when my boss called me into his office with a look of frantic desperation. He told me that a potential client had mistaken me for one of our latest models and wanted to buy me. My jaw hit the floor. "Boss, look, I know I'm broke, and my rent is overdue, but I am not planning on selling my body or my soul just yet," I said, my voice rising in disbelief. "I have standards." My boss looked at me with a mixture of pity and annoyance, clearly calculating the profit margin he was about to lose. "Eric, you are missing the point," he said, waving a hand dismissively. "The client is a major CEO. A man. What exactly are you imagining? I have already contacted the factory. They are rushing to build a custom robot that looks exactly like you. All you have to do is pretend to be the robot until the real unit is ready. When it's done, you just pretend to malfunction. He sends you back for repairs, and we swap you out. Easy." I knew I was handsome. It was my best sales tactic, so the idea of a robot modeled after my face wasn't entirely shocking. But the timeline didn't make sense. If he wants a robot that looks like me, can't the CEO just wait 3 months for the custom order? I asked. My boss looked at me like I was the most incompetent person he had ever met. 3 months? In this market? He scoffed. By the time 3 months pass, the interest will be gone. The competition is fierce, Eric. We aren't the only robotics firm in the city. That sounds like a you problem, boss, I said, leaning back in my chair. I'm just a beautiful young man trying to do the bare minimum and go home. Seeing my indifference, my boss sighed and leaned forward, dropping his voice to a conspiratorial whisper. $1 million, he said clearly. For 3 months of work. $1 million. 3 months. I immediately sat up straight, fixed my collar, and wiped the look of boredom off my face. "Sir," I said, my voice trembling with sudden patriotic fervor for the company, "sharing the burdens of leadership is an employee's greatest duty. It is what I should do. When do I start?" The very next day, I was dressed in a sleek, synthetic-looking suit, packed into the back of a high-end delivery van, and driven to a sprawling estate in the hills. I felt ridiculous, but the promise of $1 million kept me perfectly still. My colleagues had briefed me that the client was the infamous CEO of the Genesis Group, a man known for being elegant, generous, and incredibly busy. This reassured me. CEOs were always flying around the world. He probably wouldn't even be home. I could just sit around the mansion, pretend to recharge, and plan my future life of luxury. I was already mentally spending the money on a yacht. However, the moment the heavy oak doors opened and I saw the client, my dreams of a yacht crashed into an iceberg. Elegant and generous? No. Petty and vindictive were better descriptors. It had been years, but he clearly still held a grudge. He wanted a robot that looked like me just so he could order it around and bully it. It was a twisted form of psychological victory. If I had bothered to read the client dossier instead of just the manual titled Essential Skills and Etiquette for Butlers, I would have known his name. If I had known, I never would have agreed to this. Well, actually, I would have come. But I would have demanded $2 million. The man standing before me was Benjamin. He was my high school nemesis. Back in high school, everyone knew that Eric and the class president, Benjamin, were mortal enemies. It wasn't even about anything serious initially. I never understood if he was just too book-smart for his own good, or if he just naturally hated my face. He constantly targeted me. If I slept in class, he woke the teacher. If I snuck a cigarette behind the gym, he brought the dean to watch. If I managed to get a girlfriend, he somehow sowed discord and broke us up. The man was a menace. I never figured out how I had offended him, but eventually, I snapped. One afternoon, I cornered him on his way home, intending to intimidate him. I wanted him to know that Eric was not someone to be trifled with. I had stalked his route for 2 days before I caught him. I backed him into a brick wall. Even though he was slightly taller than me, I felt my anger gave me the advantage. "Benjamin," I sneered, slamming my hand against the wall by his head. "Do you think you're untouchable? I am warning you, stop meddling in my business." He frowned, his eyes dark and unreadable behind his glasses. I thought he was afraid. Emboldened, I tapped his cheek with my free hand. "Here is the deal," I said, grinning. "You call me daddy, apologize nicely, and I might consider letting you off the hook. In a flash, he grabbed my wrist. His grip was like iron. He stared at me coldly and whispered, "You had best not provoke me." I was young, arrogant, and fueled by teenage hormones. I didn't take threats well. We ended up in a fistfight right there on the sidewalk. The aftermath was predictable. I got suspended, and he got sympathy. He was the golden boy, the scholar, and everyone assumed I had bullied him. I held on to that grudge for years. I spent the rest of high school finding petty ways to annoy him, and I thought I had won the war of attrition. Now, 8 years later, I stood frozen in his foyer, staring at the adult Benjamin. He was still wearing glasses, but he looked sharper, deeper, and far more dangerous. I wasn't the impulsive kid I used to be. Life and poverty had humbled me. I quickly composed myself. I couldn't let a high school rivalry stand between me and $1 million. I maintained the fixed, plastic smile characteristic of our robot models. I bowed stiffly, moving my joints with calculated precision. "Good afternoon, sir," I said, my voice modulated to sound slightly artificial. "I am your personal butler robot. You may assign me a designation." He didn't answer immediately. He just stared at me. His gaze lingered on my face for a long time, long enough that I started to sweat under my synthetic collar. I began to panic. Had I blinked too much? Was I breathing too loudly? Then I remembered the industry specs. Modern androids were indistinguishable from humans visually. The primary directive was absolute obedience. As long as I didn't disobey, and he didn't try to open me up with a screwdriver, I should be safe. I forced myself to stare back, unblinking. Finally, after an eternity, he spoke. "Then you shall be called Eric." I mentally rolled my eyes. "Of course." "Affirmative, sir," I said. Designation accepted, Eric. The villa wasn't ostentatious, but it was massive. He lived alone. Upon my arrival, Benjamin dismissed the entire cleaning staff. "The robot will handle everything," he told them. My internal monologue screamed. He was even going to exploit a robot? The man was a capitalist monster. But for the salary I was being paid, I swallowed my pride. Fortunately, he was indeed a busy CEO. He rarely came home, leaving me alone to roam the empty halls and do the bare minimum of dusting. I thought I had it made. I didn't see him again until late one night, 2 weeks later. He came home well past midnight. My internal sensors, my ears, heard the car, and I was forced to drag myself out of bed, put on my suit, and stand by the door to welcome him. He smelled of expensive scotch and exhaust fumes. I braced myself for humiliation. I expected him to make me scrub the floors with a toothbrush or stand on one leg. To my surprise, he just loosened his tie and sat on the sofa, gesturing for me to sit opposite him. He started chatting casually. He asked about my daily routine, my high-level functions, and my manufacturing date. These were standard questions I answered for customers daily, so I slipped into sales mode, rattling off specs and praising the Genesis Group's wise investment in our technology. He leaned back, closing his eyes, looking incredibly weary. I stopped talking, assuming he had fallen asleep. I stood up silently, intending to grab a blanket to throw over him so I could go back to bed. Suddenly, his eyes snapped open. "Why did you stop talking?" he asked. "Your voice sounds very much like his." My heart skipped a beat. "Like whose, sir?" I asked innocently. "The real Eric," he murmured. "Your boss told me that Eric used to work for him. He said because Eric had such a refined and symmetrical face, they used his likeness for mass production." Mass production? Excuse me? That lying snake of a boss. He was selling my face without royalties? I needed to renegotiate my contract immediately. Before I could process my indignation, Benjamin reached out and grabbed my chin. His fingers were warm. He tilted my face left and right, examining me like a piece of art. "It is truly a handsome face," he said softly. "It is the most beautiful face I have ever seen." I felt a flush rising up my neck. I didn't need him to tell me I was handsome, but the way he said it, and the fact that he was touching me, sent a weird jolt through my system. I remembered I was a robot. Robots do not blush. Robots do not feel awkward. "Thank you, sir," I said, forcing a polite, mechanical smile. I do not know the human Eric personally. My manufacturing date was last month. Perhaps Mr. Eric left the company before I came online. Benjamin lowered his eyes, a shadow of disappointment crossing his face. "Is that so?" he whispered. "Then I suppose I will never see him again." He sounded genuinely sad. It made me uncomfortable. I was just unemployed, not dead. Why was he acting like he was mourning a lost love? This wasn't the vindictive Benjamin I expected. I thought he bought me to punch me. Was it possible he had a conscience? Was he regretting how he treated me in high school? I decided to probe. If you require, sir, I can access my database and send a query to the manufacturer regarding Mr. Eric's whereabouts. No, he said quickly. Do not bother him. He probably hates me. He wouldn't want to see me. Well, that was accurate. If I had known it was him, I wouldn't be here. At least he had some self-awareness. Was Mr. Eric a friend of yours? I asked, pushing my luck. Benjamin shook his head slowly, a bitter smile touching his lips. How could we be considered friends? He looked at me, his eyes intense. He was my ex-boyfriend. My internal processor crashed. Error 404. Logic not found. I stared at him, struggling to keep my face neutral. What was he talking about? I was straight. I had always been straight. And my relationship with Benjamin in high school was pure, unadulterated hatred. We were rivals, not lovers. Was this a new form of psychological warfare? Was he trying to gaslight a robot? But I was a machine. I couldn't look shocked. I quickly reset my expression to polite interest. Seeing my slight glitch, Benjamin chuckled. Perhaps he wouldn't count it as such, he continued. I confessed to him. He accepted. But then he turned around and forgot about it. I am the only one who remembered. Wait. A memory, buried deep under layers of cringe and teenage stupidity, began to surface. I did confess to him once. But it was a joke. I thought he was homophobic. I thought he hated gay people. I did it to gross him out. It was senior year. A cute girl named Charlotte was chasing me. I liked her, so I said yes. Charlotte was great. She helped me with homework and brought me snacks. But Benjamin, the joy killer, ruined it. We had a system where students picked their seats based on grades. I was always last because my grades were trash. Everyone knew Charlotte and I were a thing, so they left the seat next to her empty for me. But Benjamin, who picked first, walked right past the front row and sat next to Charlotte. I was furious. I marched up to him. Are you doing this on purpose? I demanded. He looked up, his face blank. The light is better here, he said monotonously. If you want a better seat, Eric, try studying instead of failing. Stop being the last one to pick. He was mocking me. I almost punched him then and there, but Charlotte stopped me. 2 days later, Charlotte broke up with me. She gave me a speech about how studying is more important and early romance is a distraction. It sounded exactly like something Benjamin would say. I knew he had poisoned her mind. I swore revenge. The next month, I studied. I studied hard. When seat selection came, I had moved up the ranks. Benjamin, creature of habit, had taken a seat in the back row where nobody wanted to sit, presumably to avoid people. I marched right over and sat next to him. Class president, I said, flashing a shark-like grin. We are deskmates now. Are you happy? My implication was clear. Watch your back. He ignored me completely. I tried to bully him physically, but I quickly learned he knew martial arts or something. Every time I tried to shove him, he would twist my arm and pin me to the desk, whispering threats into my ear. It was humiliating. So, I switched to psychological warfare. I discovered he flinched whenever I touched him. He acted like I was diseased. Are you homophobic? I asked him one day. He didn't answer. I leaned in close, draping my arm around his shoulders. I love men, I whispered. Does that disgust you? He shoved me away violently. Get away from me, he hissed. You are repulsive. That reaction was all the fuel I needed. It was study hall. I stood up and shouted to the silent room. Hey everyone, do you know why I sit next to the class president? 30 heads turned. Because I have been in love with him for years. I declared, hand over my heart. The class erupted. It was chaos. Everyone laughed because they knew it was a joke. They knew we hated each other. It was the height of comedy. Benjamin's face went scarlet. He slammed his hands on the desk. What is everyone laughing at? He roared, losing his composure for the first time. Is your homework done? Eric, if you disrupt the discipline one more time, get out. The class went silent, but I saw the suppressed giggles. I looked at Benjamin's paper. He hadn't written a single word in 20 minutes. I had won. I walked home that day humming a tune, feeling the sweet taste of vengeance. I came back to the present, looking at the man sitting across from me. Benjamin remembered that? And he took it seriously? Wait, was he testing me? Did he know I was human and was trying to see if I would crack? I couldn't break character. If he forgot, then he forgot, I said soothingly. A man of your caliber can certainly find someone better. I cannot, Benjamin said, looking at his hands. I never liked anyone else. Just him. He stood up abruptly. I am going to take a shower. Go to my room and wait for me. Panic flared in my chest. Wait for you? Yes. I need the bed turned down. Sir, I stammered, I cannot. I do not have the programming for companionship services. You may have to wait for the next firmware update. Benjamin laughed, a genuine, rich sound. You stupid robot. I do not know if you are too smart or not smart enough. I just want you to prepare the bed and tidy the room. Can you not even do that? Apologies, sir, I said, bowing. I misunderstood. I will learn. I went to his bedroom. It was immaculate. It smelled of sandalwood and expensive clean laundry. His books were stacked by size. It was exactly what I expected from a control freak. There was nothing to clean. I stood there like a statue, blinking every few seconds, waiting for him. I glanced at the digital clock. 1:30 a.m. I was exhausted. He came out wearing only a towel loosely draped around his hips. I yawned. It just slipped out. I tried to cover it, but our eyes met in the mirror. I froze. Come here, he commanded. I walked over. He raised an eyebrow. Do robots get sleepy? Affirmative, I improvised rapidly. We mimic human circadian rhythms to integrate better. Low battery levels result in simulated fatigue. I need to recharge. Suddenly, his wet hand reached out and touched the back of my neck. I shivered violently. He pinched the skin there. Where is the charging port? He asked. Usually, the port is on the cervical spine. He was suspicious. I said, my brain running at light speed. The designers felt that exposed ports on the neck were vulnerable to dust. In the Prime model, the port has been relocated to the chest cavity. He looked at my chest. He couldn't exactly ask me to strip. That would be weird, even for him. Fine, he said, releasing me. Since you are low on battery, go recharge. Dismissed. I practically ran to my room. I locked the door and collapsed. This $1 million was the hardest money I had ever earned. The next morning, I called my boss. I can't do this, I whispered into the phone. He's weird. He touches me. He asks questions. Eric, my boss yelled. Don't be a coward. You signed a contract. Just hold on. The factory says 1 more month. If you finish the job, I'll give you a $50,000 bonus. Deal. I sighed. Fine. For the next week, I was a model robot. I cleaned things that were already clean. I watered his plants until they drowned. But then, I made a mistake. I was cleaning his study, and I found a drawer that wasn't locked. Inside was a notebook, and tucked into the notebook was a photo. It was us. Graduation day. I had taken photos with everyone. I remembered Benjamin asking for one, and I had agreed just to be magnanimous. But here it was. The edges were worn, as if it had been held often. I dug deeper. There was a small box. Inside were dozens of photos. All of me. Me playing basketball. Me sleeping in class. Me laughing with Charlotte. Candid shots he must have taken secretly. I sat on the floor, staring at the evidence. Benjamin actually liked me? Me? Eric? The guy who tormented him? The realization hit me like a truck. He wasn't homophobic. He pushed me away because he was terrified. He reacted to my fake confession with anger because for him, it wasn't a joke. I had mocked his deepest secret in front of 30 people. Guilt, heavy and cold, settled in my stomach. I was a monster. I was the bully. I went out to the balcony and smoked a cigarette, shaking. I couldn't keep doing this. I had to be nicer to him. I had to at least make his life easier while I was here. A few days later, Benjamin came home sick. He had been working himself to death, and a flu knocked him flat. He was feverish and delirious. I brought him water and medicine. He was sitting at his desk, shivering, trying to type. Sir, I said gently, you need to rest. He looked up, his eyes glassy. You don't look like him, he mumbled. Can you? Can you pretend to be him? Just for a minute. I froze. I am Eric, sir. He reached out and pulled me toward him. I lost my balance and fell into his lap. I tried to scramble away, but his arms locked around me. He buried his face in my neck. He was burning up. You're warm, he whispered. Robots are supposed to be cold. Internal heating unit, I squeaked. 4. Cuddling comfort. He didn't let go. He held me for an hour, his breathing leveling out as he fell asleep. I could feel his heart beating against my back. And, terrifyingly, he could probably feel mine. I managed to extricate myself and called his personal doctor. For the next week, I nursed him. I cooked real food. I made sure he took his pills. I watched him sleep. When he recovered, he was different. He watched me constantly. "Why are you avoiding me?" he asked one afternoon as I aggressively mopped the dry floor. "I am giving you space, sir." He laughed. "Stop working. Come here. Sit." "That is an order." I sat. "I have a family birthday party tonight," he said. "You are coming with me." "Sir, is that wise?" "A robot at a gala. I want you there. Wear the blue suit." The party was at a massive hotel. I walked behind him, stiff and silent. Benjamin was immediately swarmed by relatives. He left me near the buffet with strict instructions not to wander. I stood there, staring at the shrimp cocktail. I was starving. "Hey," a voice said. A young man, maybe 20, was staring at me. "Who are you?" "I am the prime model butler robot, designated Eric," I said automatically. "I am available for purchase at—" "Whoa," the kid yelled. "It's a robot. Guys, come look." Suddenly, I was surrounded by rich college kids. They poked my arms. They touched my hair. "He looks so real," one girl said. "Can I pinch him?" "Please refrain from damaging the merchandise," I said robotically. "I want one," the kid said. "Hey, Benjamin." Benjamin appeared out of the crowd, looking furious. He pushed through the circle and grabbed my arm, pulling me away from the prying hands. "Get your own." Benjamin snapped at his cousin. "Come on, Ben, it's just a machine." "Where did you buy it?" Benjamin looked at his cousin, then at me. He tightened his grip on my hand. "He isn't a machine," Benjamin said loud enough for the group to hear. "He is the person I love." The circle went silent. The cousin looked at me, then at Benjamin, and smirked. "Oh, I get it. Kinky." I wanted to die. Benjamin dragged me out of the party. He drove us home in silence. The tension in the car was thick enough to choke on. When we got back to the villa, I tried to retreat to my room. "Eric," he said. I stopped. "Go lock the front door." I need to recharge." "Lock the door." I walked to the door. I put my hand on the latch. I could just open it and run. I could run down the hill, find a highway, and hitchhike to Mexico. "You know, don't you?" Benjamin's voice came from right behind me. I turned around. He was leaning against the wall, looking tired but certain. "You know how I feel about you. You saw the photos." I couldn't lie. "Not about this." "I saw them. Why didn't you run then?" I swallowed. "I needed the money." He laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "Of course. Money." He stepped closer. "But you stayed when I was sick. You held me. Was that for money too?" "No." The word slipped out before I could stop it. He trapped me against the door. He leaned in, his face inches from mine. "I love you, Eric. I have loved you since you threw an eraser at me in 10th grade. I loved you when you hated me. I loved you when you mocked me." He kissed me. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was desperate, angry, and full of years of pent-up longing. And God help me, I kissed him back. I wasn't a robot. I was a man who had been lonely and broke, and who had just realized that the person he hated most was the only person who had ever truly seen him. He pulled back, breathing hard. He bit my lip, hard enough to break the skin. "Ow!" I yelled. "Are you a dog?" He wiped a drop of blood from my lip with his thumb. He showed it to me. "Robots don't bleed, Eric." I stared at the blood. The jig was up. "When did you know?" I whispered. "The first night," he said. "You snore." I turned bright red. "I do not." "You do. And you eat my leftovers when you think I'm asleep. And you have a heartbeat." He rested his forehead against mine. "I just wanted to see how long you would stay." "I'm sorry," I said. "For high school. For the fake confession. For everything. You can make it up to me," he said. "Starting now." The next morning, Benjamin drove me to my office. He marched in, past the receptionist, and straight to my boss's desk. "Mr. Yeah." My boss jumped up. "Is there a defect?" "I swear the new unit is almost ready." Benjamin slammed a check onto the desk. "I am buying him out." "The robot." "The human," Benjamin said. "I am terminating his employment with you. He works for me now. Permanently." My boss looked at the check, then at me, then at Benjamin. "Sold," he said. We walked out to the car. I felt dazed. "So," I said as we got in, "I'm unemployed." You're not unemployed, Benjamin said, starting the engine. You're my partner. I never agreed to be your boyfriend. I grumbled, though I couldn't hide my smile. You didn't say no last night, he said with a smirk. Call me husband. Excuse me. Practice. Call me husband. I looked out the window, watching the city roll by. I thought about the photos in the drawer, the feverish confession, and the way he looked at me like I was the only person in the world. Husband, I whispered, so quietly I hoped he wouldn't hear. Louder, he said. Drive the car, Benjamin. I shouted. He laughed, and for the first time in 8 years, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. Benjamin's perspective, I have loved Eric for a very long time. If I had to pinpoint the moment, it was a Tuesday evening in sophomore year. Everyone else had gone home. I was finishing a report in the empty classroom, and he was sitting 2 rows ahead, peeling an orange. He dropped his eraser. It rolled to my feet. I picked it up. He turned around, the setting sun catching his messy hair, turning it into a halo of gold. His eyes were the color of amber. Thanks, he said, taking the eraser. Then he broke off a piece of his orange and held it out. Want some? It was such a simple, human gesture. I stared at him, terrified by how fast my heart started beating. I declined, coldly, because I didn't know how to be anything else. He wasn't a good student. He smoked, he fought, he slept in class. But he was vibrant. He was alive in a way I wasn't. I was the class president, trapped by expectations. He was chaos. I tried to help him. I reported him for sleeping so he would wake up and learn. I reported the smoking so he wouldn't ruin his lungs. But he misunderstood. He thought I hated him. When he started dating Charlotte, I felt a jealousy so poisonous it nearly consumed me. I sat next to them not to annoy him, but because I couldn't bear to be far away. I needed to separate them. It was selfish. It was villainous. I didn't care. Then came the confession. When he shouted to the class that he loved me, my world stopped. For a split second, I allowed myself to believe it. Then the laughter started. The mockery. He was using my deepest desire as a punchline. I hated him then, but I loved him more. Years later, when my assistant told me a struggling salesman named Eric was working at a robotics firm, I didn't hesitate. I went to the showroom. I didn't find him, but I found a robot that wore his face. I bought it. It was a pathetic substitute, cold and lifeless, but it was something. Then, I was told the real Eric might be available for a special assignment. When he walked into my foyer, stiff and pretending to be a machine, I almost laughed. He was terrible at it. He fidgeted. He breathed. His eyes darted around the room with that familiar, chaotic energy. I knew it was him instantly. I could have exposed him. I could have kicked him out. But I was greedy. I wanted to keep him. I wanted to see him every day. So I played along. I pretended to be the cruel master, just to see him pout and grumble. When I got sick, and he held me, that was the moment I knew I would never let him go. He was warm. He was real. And he stayed. He thinks I bought him out of a contract. He doesn't realize I would have given up everything I own just to hear him call my name without hate in his voice. He is mine now. And this time, I am never giving him a reason to leave.